Hi everyone, welcome to Superpowers for Managers, the first of 3 live sessions that we're going to be hosting at Progression over the next few weeks. Thank you so much to everyone who's joined us so far today. Please pop in a message in the chat to let us know where in the world you're joining from and your current role. It'd be great to say hello to everyone and see our coverage internationally. Today, I'm joined by my colleague Katie, who is our product lead. My name is Meg. I lead up customer success at Progression, and we're going to be taking you through Superpowers for Managers. Before we get started on that, just a little reminder or an introduction of who we are at Progression. Progression is a career design platform that is designed to empower people to own their career story. We believe that career growth happens every day and not just once a quarter, and that good career clarity comes from collecting meaningful data and then using that data to inform the conversations we have about our careers so that they can become better and better. Focusing in on what we're going to be covering today, here's the agenda. So we're going to start by talking about why you need manager superpowers right now. We'll talk a little bit about how Progression can help you to get and then use those superpowers. And then Katie's going to hop into Progression and she's going to walk through some of the new things we've been working on to help you. We'll then talk through what to do with those new things at your organisation. And finally, we're hoping to leave enough time at the end of the session to cover as many questions as we can from the audience. So please, as we go, add your questions to the chat and we'll get through as many of those as we can at the end of the session. So without further ado, let's jump into why you need superpowers right now. Losing members of your team is costly and demotivating. It feels like an obvious thing to say. We've got some stats coming up in a moment to really highlight this, but we all know that employee turnover is costly. It demotivates your team when you lose a really great member of your team. So keeping your team is the goal here, and helping them to visualize where they can grow in their careers, because your team want that career growth, but they need help visualizing it. We've all heard it or felt it ourselves at one time or another. I don't know what I need to do in order to progress or grow at work, whether that's a team member working towards a promotion or someone looking to become a master of their own craft. We as human beings, we want to know what's next for us. We want to know how to get there. And your task as a manager is often showing your team what's possible in your organization and beyond. There are skills strengths and skills gaps in your team, and you need to be able to see those in order to support them. Everyone is different. We all have our own strengths and weaknesses. As a manager, you need to know the balance of your team. You need to identify and nurture those strengths in your team so that people can become better and better. And you also need to be able to plug gaps with support, whether that's through training and development, or it's through hiring someone in because you've noticed that you need extra hands, extra skills in your team as well. Finally, showing that you care about career growth is going to help you to attract the very best talent that's out there. When you're working towards finding that balance in your team of those skills, strengths, you can work to maintain that. Hiring in top talent to support you is so important. Candidates now want to know how your organisation approaches career development and the opportunities that are going to be available to them if they choose your organisation. A progression framework will show them that you care about this, that you're prioritizing this in your organization, and that if they join you, they're going to be able to see how they can develop over time in the long run as well. If you're in any doubt about why you need superpowers and how costly it can be if you don't sort of hone those, here are some scary stats that we've pulled to support that. So 33% is the percent of an employee's annual salary that it will cost to replace them when they resign. 42% is how many people looking for a new job say that their company isn't prioritizing and maximizing their skills and abilities. And 27.5 is the average number of days that it takes to hire a new employee. So it's costly for you in time and money to go through this process. So retaining your team, retaining your high performers is the goal here. And how can Progression help you with that? So we believe that it breaks down into building, collecting, growing, supporting, and sharing your talent. So build a single source of truth. Your progression framework is the foundation you will use for your team to know what skills are important in your team and how they can go about developing those and giving examples of where they're being used today. Collecting, you want to collect that data. This is going to empower your team to own their own careers by capturing that growth over time. So we have a suite of features like wins, feedback, actions that allow team members to capture their career development activities over time and track that through. when we come to grow, we're going to use that evidence in check-ins to inform meaningful conversations about the career. So based on all of that evidence that someone's collecting over time, those are going to inform those conversations and make sure that you're having conversations that really matter, that are guided and directed through those skills that are a part of your framework. To support, you're going to be able to, as a manager, help your members of your team as you go along the way. Using insights in progression is going to help you to identify the skills, strengths, and gaps in your team and deploy support where it's needed the most. So you'll know where to focus in your time, who's absolutely smashing it, who maybe needs a little bit more training and support to get there, and you're going to be able to be the best manager you can be. And finally, you're going to share your framework publicly. You can use this to set you apart from the rest when you're trying to attract that top talent. You can show employees what they can expect working in your organization and how career progression is a priority for you. So I'm going to hand over to Katie now. She's going to take you into the app to show you how you can build, collect, grow, support, and share using progression and our new features that we've been working on recently. So over to you, Katie.
Thank you very much, Meg. Hi, yeah, I'm Katie, Progression's product lead. So looking forward to giving you a very whistle-stop tour of a lot of our product today. So I'm going to be talking through some of the features we've shipped recently. I think there's quite a few people on this webinar who are relatively new to Progression, so I'll probably give you a bit of a general overview about where everything lives and how it works as well. And yeah, a bit of peek into our roadmap as well. So a bit of a kind of insight into some of the areas that we're going to be investing in and focusing on going forward, so you know what's coming up. And do keep dropping those questions into the chat as well as we go. I'll probably be rattling through things really quickly. So yeah, do drop those questions in as we go, and we'll make sure we come back to them at the end. So yeah, here we are in Progression. I'm logged in as a demo user called Jane. Jane is the manager and leader of a product design team. So we're going to focus first on build. As Meg said, that's really like, how do you as a manager create that initial clarity on expectations, on career path that really helps everyone in your team understand where do they stand and where could they go next. So you can see here, for example, Vivian is currently a senior product designer. And this view of the framework, the sort of positions view, really shows like, you know, what's the next step in her kind of track, or could she even start to explore a step into management? So again, she can kind of dive across this kind of positions matrix and really see like, what are the roles available to me and where am I now? And then in terms of the clarity of expectations, we can jump into this really more detailed framework view. So Vivian can again find herself and say, okay, for senior product designer, like here are all the exact kind of detailed requirements, expectations, examples of how I should be demonstrating that skill. So it's really just the home of this clarity that you need as a manager to kind of support your team and make sure the expectations and career paths are clear from the start. I do want to call out the compare feature as well, which you might not have discovered yet. We really like this feature because essentially it lets you as a manager and your report together sit together and say, okay, what is your goal position? Where do you want to go? And how do we spot the kind of skill gaps and opportunities for you to actually work towards that role? So if I was Vivian, a senior product designer wanting to move into a design manager, I can overlay those two roles and basically see the diff, see the kind of gaps, see where I'm already over exceeding, see what I need to work on a little bit more, which is some of those leadership and hiring skills. And in a lot of detail, understand, okay, here's where I am now, and here's some of the areas that I might need to work on in order to get me there. So that's a bit of an overview of our kind of build process and how you really create that initial expectations and kind of career path clarity as a manager to the people in your team. We're going to move on to collect now. So as Meg said, this is really like, how are those individuals in your team really owning their progression over time, working on it every day, not just once a quarter. So we believe the way that we're unlocking and enabling this for teams is through what we call the work feed. So this is essentially your landing view on progression, and it's basically an aggregated feed of all of those activities that Meg mentioned: wins, completing actions, giving and receiving feedback, completing check-ins, which I'll go into in a bit more detail in a minute. And essentially, as they happen, that's all getting added to this work feed. It's basically your log of evidence of all the things you've done, crucially all tagged up with skills as well. So it really all comes back to that framework and back to the skills that are really important and really do help you grow. The superpower for managers here is that when you log into Progression, this feed is defaulting to everything that your team is doing, everyone in your reporting line. And then what's cool is that you can filter that down. So say, you've got a one-to-one coming up with Lance and you're wondering, what's Lance been up to lately? Has he done those things that we talked about last time? How's he kind of doing? What's on his mind? we can filter down to Lance and basically see all the stuff that Lance has been doing recently, so that we can then reference it at that when we have that kind of career conversation. So we can see that Lance has completed an action recently, so I'll make sure that I mention that and give him some feedback. He's focused a new focus skill, he's focused vision, so we can have a conversation about how I might support him in working towards that new focus skill that he's indicated. He got a win, so I'll make sure I celebrate that, and so on. He's done a check-in recently, and I can jump back in and kind of review the check-in. So really this kind of gives you as a manager like real clarity, like real kind of visibility on everything that your team is doing, and helps you have better quality conversations. So if we move now into check-ins, more onto the kind of grow side, like how do you have that career conversation that, you know, really superpowers and really empowers your team, makes it very easy for you as a manager to kind of do that process in a way that feels fair, unbiased, and really in the interest of that individual and what's important to them. So if you're familiar with the platform, we have a slightly new way of initiating the check-in now that's a little bit easier. And if you're new to check-ins, I'll give you a bit of an introduction. So check-ins are basically our feature where you have that kind of career conversation that's really rooted in the skills that are required of you. Basically, they run in 3 stages. So the individual does their own assessment on their own skills. They kind of can step through and assess how they're doing, enter all their evidence. The assessor, which is typically the manager, comes in and does their review. And then you get together and have a joint review where you kind of look through, see if there's any differences in opinion, and kind of land on the outcome of the check-in that you're both agreed on. So we believe it's a very kind of fair, transparent process that is really rooted in the skills that are interesting to that individual. So essentially an individual can initiate a check-in at any time. They can give it a title and description, which is a new feature for us. So you can really kind of focus down on what's important to you, and you as a manager have that visibility into like, this is what my report wants to talk about, so that you're prepared. So maybe that person wants to focus on some certain skills, or they want to have a conversation about actually moving into a new role. They can set that attention ahead of time, and you get the visibility on that. So now if we jump into a check-in that's in flight, this is what it looks like as you're doing the check-in. So you have the skill, you have all the requirements. It's very easy to kind of look at those and reference them as you go. And you can actually then jump in and see all the levels of that skill as well. So if you kind of want to understand, you know, I'm level 3, but am I actually, you know, way over indexing, you know, I just want to refer to the level 5, or am I even fulfilling all the kind of requirements of the kind of base level 1? It just lets you kind of have real good visibility into like all levels of that skill and make a very fair assessment about where this individual is. The other thing that's really cool here that we've kind of added recently is that you can again jump into that kind of work feed updates at any time. So here you just see that feed of all the updates that are tagged against this skill, and it really helps you kind of fill out your assessment in a way that is very rooted in evidence, very fair, and takes some of the effort off as well. It just kind of jogs your memory and helps you say, oh yeah, I did get that feedback, I did complete that action, so I'll make sure I reference those when I'm filling in my assessment. So that's what it looks like to do the check-in. And then if we go look at a completed check-in, this one here, we've given this page a bit of a spruce up as well. So when you've gone through all the 3 stages of a check-in, you get this summary page for every single check-in, and it really just kind of helps set the scene, set expectations, show how much this individual has grown, and crucially for you as a manager, it gives you a chance to really set intentions going forwards as well. So again, we have the kind of similar skill map, so you can see the outcome of that check-in matched against the role. So you can actually see Jimmy was exceeding in a few areas. He's still working towards a couple of areas. So that starts to give you that sense of where Jimmy could be focusing next based on the outcome of that check-in. We've got all the skills listed here, and you can see the ones that he's already exceeding in, the ones he's improving in. We have a feature called Focus Skills, which lets you focus in on up to 3 skills, because we kind of recognise that actually it's really hard to work on a lot of skills at once. So we let individuals set up 3 focus skills, and it might be here, Jimmy was focusing on these 2 that he's now exceeding. It might be a good point to say, actually, let's switch off those, switch on some of these new focus skills that you're working towards, and we're going to kind of figure out how we improve and really focus you on the ones that really need improvement. And then down here, you can basically write a summary for the check-in. So just kind of a reminder and overview of what you discussed and any kind of important next steps. And crucially, you can then also set an action at this point as well. So again, you can tag those up to skills. You can set a time frame on them. And this is really you setting that intention of like, what am I going to do next as a manager? How am I going to support this individual to develop? What is that individual committing to, you know, that keeps their growth on track? And the final cool thing to call out as a manager tool on this view of check-ins is that you can now download the outcome of every single check-in as either a CSV or a PDF. So it might be you have a another performance management system that you need to integrate with. Progression basically lets you export that data, brings it into that other system, and just makes it much easier for you to keep on top of other platforms, other tools that your company might be using. So that is our growth and kind of development feature. The final thing I want to call out is more on the kind of team and kind of insights level. So as Meg was saying, you know, to support your team, you really need this kind of insight and visibility on the kind of skill trends. You want to kind of identify those skill gaps, the skill strengths. You want to understand if your team is engaged. So this is where our reports section and insights comes in. So this report section, we've given it a bit of an overhaul recently. It lets you at a glance see your entire team, see the outcomes of their most recent check-ins, helps you identify if there's an action for you to take. So does this individual have an open check-in that I need to act on? And gives you a bit of snapshot of their engagement. So how many updates have they logged into their feed? How many actions have they got open? So it's a good place just to come and just see at a glance, you know, what do I need to do and how's everyone doing? One interesting thing you can do from here is jump into this individual's growth page. So this is a beta page that we launched at the end of last year. The goal of this page is really to provide each individual with a sort of profile of their growth over time, which should feel really motivating. It should really help them see, you know, where was I, where have I gone, where could I go next? This chart is basically showing Jimmy's check-ins over time. So he's got 3 here, May, November. It shows all the skills that were checked in against the outcome of those check-ins. And it becomes quite cool when you then go and filter this down by skill, because you can really see Jimmy's really improved his team leadership. He was working towards it and he was meeting, now he's exceeding it. So it really gives the team that kind of motivation of like, I was here, now I'm here. And it's another kind of at a glance snapshot of where Jimmy is. You don't have to jump into that check-in summary. It's just a kind of holding place for all of that information about where this person is now and how they got there. But then interestingly, at a team level, we kind of recognize that you as a manager, you want this kind of insight, not just on the individual level, but at the team level to really help you spot those kind of skill gaps, trends, engagement in your team as a whole. So when you jump into this reports and insights page, it's defaulting again to like all of your reporting line. You can also draw that down to the individual again. But this is really showing at a team level, you know, how are we doing? So this gray represents the average kind of required skills for every position in that team. And you can see as a team, you know, okay, we're really over-indexing in some of these leadership skills, but we're falling a bit behind on these human skills. So as a manager, I could then think, okay, how do I support my team and pull up some of those skills that, you know, as a team we're working towards? Again, we give you a snapshot of the skills that are kind of the strongest and the most up for improvement in your team. And then here we've got the engagement insights. So this just really helps you see as a manager, you know, which of my team are more or less engaged with progression. Are we using it every day? Are we collecting that evidence as we go? How are we doing month on month? You know, are we kind of trending up or down? And again, you can filter this down to the individual. So you can see, for example, Jimmy is doing really well. Lance is doing pretty well. Maybe someone is doing less well. Yeah. So it really, again, helps you spot, you know, who do I need to go and support and encourage, you know, to keep logging things with progression to make it easier for them to have that next growth story. The final thing I wanted to call out is our notifications and alerts. So you don't even have to remember to visit progression to get all this information. We'll make sure that we notify you about anything that's important to you. So there's 3 kinds of notification here. One is just reminders of things that you have to do, things that you have to act on. So if you've got an open check-in, we'll give you a reminder until you've come and completed it. We give you that visibility on activity that's happening with your reports within your team. So all of the kind of wins, reactions, feedback that they're receiving, you'll be notified as and when it happens. And we also give you notifications around high and low activity in your team. So if there are kind of trends of, you know, reports not making updates or someone hasn't had a check-in for a few months, we'll nudge you and remind you just so that you have that visibility on people that you might have to go and support. And these notifications come through the Progression app, but then they you can also choose to have them delivered by email or even via Slack, so they can go right to wherever you are, wherever you're doing your work, so you don't need to remember to come back to Progression and check it out. So that is pretty much everything I wanted to show you. Just 3 things I wanted to call out on the roadmap to give you a kind of glimpse of what's coming up and what we're thinking about heavily at the moment. So this concept of insights and growth over time is something that's very important to us, and we're going to be thinking about how we add even more kind of richer insights and really help people understand, you know, their growth and really kind of feel their growth in progression. So that's an area that's really important to us. Supporting you and developing your framework content is really, really important to us, not just your first time builds, which some of you might be in that position at the moment and kind of wondering where to go next, but also making sure your content stays fresh and relevant over time. So maybe the people in your team have feedback about the skills, or maybe they kind of degrade and, you know, feel less fresh. We really want to support you in getting continued value and not losing that clarity that we want you to be able to give to your team in terms of expectations and career paths. And finally, we want to make sure it's really, really clear for an individual to see where they are now and where they could go next. So we really want a view where, you know, for Vivian, that path is just so clear to her. She knows she has a goal, she knows how to work towards it, and progression is basically her coach and her guide along with you. So we really are supporting career development in a way that is very employee centric and very kind of tailored to that individual. So that's just a few of the things that are coming up on the roadmap. But to jump back and give you some kind of concrete next steps immediately, here's 4 things that we kind of recommend you could start doing today to kind of start using some of those features that I just talked through. Firstly, if you haven't yet, set your framework to public. So it's actually really easy to do. It's right here. And as Meg said, that really helps you like attract talent, put it on your hiring pages. It really sets the intention that you're a company that cares about career development. Do go install the progression app for Slack if you haven't yet. It really helps with engagement. We find the teams that have the Slack app installed are much more engaged than those without it. So we really recommend that. You can give wins, feedback, get your notifications all without leaving Slack. Do go and check out that work feed and the manager insights. They're relatively new features, so we would love your feedback and there's plenty to explore there. And talk to your team about a check-in cadence. If you're not running them regularly right now, talk to your team about what you think they might need and really kind of come up with a system and a solution that works for you. We see teams using them, you know, as frequently as bi-weekly or monthly, all the way up to 6 monthly. So have that conversation with your team, figure out how you want to check in and use that together. And I'll hand over to Meg to wrap up. And I've seen there's quite a few questions coming in, so let's jump into those.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. Great demo. We've got a whole bunch of questions. We'll try and answer as many as we can in the short time that we've got left. So starting at the very top, Anthony, thank you so much for your question. Anthony asked, what's a good way to pitch progression as a tool to my manager or the organization? Really interesting question. Katie kind of summarized it best when she mentioned sort of an employee-centric career development route. So progression makes it really easy for members of the team to engage with the skills that are a priority at your organization. And it gives you a really clear insight and visibility as to what's next for you in your role. So that pathway is going to help motivate members of the team. It's going to help them stay. You won't be losing members of the team for reasons like, I don't know what's next for me. I can't see how to progress. And you're going to be able to, your manager will be able to see where they need to deploy training and support and where they've got people that are really strong on certain skills and how to use them for the sort of projects and work that you've got coming up. So a whole multitude of benefits when you launch progression in your organization. We're also available to help you as well. If you do want a bit of support around pitching progression to your organization, please reach out to us. We are happy to help with those conversations and provide resources as well. So we can follow up with you after the session as well, Anthony. A couple of other questions coming in. Steve, I can see you've asked a question that's got +1 from Jen. Most people are working towards the next step and check-ins seem to be focused on their current role skills. In my mind, they should be working towards and checking against the targeted role, so the next role up in that ladder. That is something that's possible on progression today. So a lot of team members default to checking in against their role as it is currently, just to kind of get a read on where they are today. But if you are having that more sort of aspirational conversation about, okay, I want to move, if I'm a design manager, I want to move into a senior design manager role, you can check in against any role in the organization as well. So you are able to do that. And Katie, thank you so much for giving the product demo as well for that. So yes, that's possible in progression too. I've got another question from Phil. Love the new intro to check-ins, really helps to focus the check-in. Thank you so much for that feedback, Phil. Katie's going to be really pleased to hear that. Can you run a check-in with one skill without having the other skills in the framework clogging up the check-in process? So great question. Check-ins, depending on the number of skills you have allocated against any given role or position, they can obviously add up those different skills to check in against. You can, in a check-in, skip skills throughout the check-in. So you could check in with just one skill in a position if you wanted to. We've also, as Katie mentioned in the demo, kind of focused around check-ins a bit more So if you want to, just go into the check-in and you can check in just against any skills. So focus skills is a really good example of that. If you've picked 3 skills that you're working on, this month, this quarter, you can focus those skills and just check in against those as well if you need to.
Yeah, and just to add, we want to make that even easier over time, because we do recognise that sometimes those check-ins can feel like a big undertaking. We already have a bit of a proof of concept for even being able to set those skills ahead of time as well, so you can really just join the check-in and only focus in on those skills that you're interested in checking in on. But yeah, as Meg said, you can actually do that when you're in flight in the check-in as well, so hopefully that helps in the short term.
Great. And I think we've got time for just one more question. Thank you everyone for logging those. As I said, we will come back to you after the session as well if you've asked a question and we haven't got round to it live. But last question from Lauren, do Progression have suggested skills to benchmark for specific roles that we can then customize? Great question. We do have a library of different skills and framework templates, collections of skills. We'd advise everyone to have a browse through that. It's made up of skills that Progression have created, that other organizations have created. We've done our best to collect as much as possible in this library, and it's growing every day. So if you do have a look in there for a specific group of skills or skill, you don't find what you're looking for, please let us know. It is something that we want to keep developing and building on, but it's a fantastic resource if you are getting started or if you're updating a framework as well. Okay, we're going to wrap up there. But also, if you think of a question after the session you haven't had a chance to ask yet in the chat, you can start a conversation with us at any time through the live chat in the product. You can email our support team at support@progression.co. And we also have a help centre that's currently being revamped, but you'll find answers in there as well through the search. So definitely take a look there as well. And all that's left to say is thank you so much for coming today. We really appreciate your time. If you have enjoyed the session, let us know, and tune in next week for Don't Break Up With Your Framework, where we'll be covering the framework build process in a little bit more detail, going into how to manage content, how to reignite that spark with framework building. And the following week, we'll be talking about unlocking meaningful growth for your team, where we'll dive into those growth features that Katie mentioned, wins, check-ins, feedback in a little bit more detail, so that they can start building up that catalogue of really great activity based on growing their careers. So don't miss those. And yeah, thank you again for your time this afternoon. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.